Juno Dawson herself, the author. She is the lovely author of books such as This Book is Gay, All of the Above, and the new one, Mind Your Head, which is the one Juno's here to discuss tonight. Joining Juno is clinical psychologist, Dr. Olivia Hewitt, whose contributions can be found in Juno's latest book, where she's quite lovely contributed. I personally love them. And glamour editor Joe Elvin.
I haven't done anything. I'm just here. Yeah.
You're involved in fantastic things. So I'm going to hand you over to them now, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, everybody. This is indeed very lovely, and I was just saying, I can't believe that bookstores in England have taken so long to cotton onto this lovely kind of welcoming space, but I'm so glad that they finally have. But thank you for being here. We are here, as you know, to discuss Mind Your Head. What I wanted to say first off the bat is I've been editing Glamour for a very long time now, but my background, my career started in teenage press, and when we were aiming literature and magazines at teenagers, it was a very, very different landscape. There was no internet, there was no mobile phone to distract them, and I think what struck me when I read this book was this was a real throwback to what I think's been really missing from that landscape for far too long. So I just want to congratulate you both on that, because with my teenage editor hat on, I was like, this has been missing, and very gravely so. It's an absolute life manual, I think, for young people really navigating quite terrifying time of their life, and possibly dealing with mental health issues, or maybe just dealing with things that we don't really class as mental health issues, but you certainly need some navigation and help through. And as a parent, I kind of feel like I will be definitely saving this and thumbing through for my own terrifying moments of raising said teenager, which is becoming all too horrifyingly close to being a reality. So congratulations to both of you, and I just wanted to start by asking the obvious thing really, is from your point of view, why did it come about? Why this book, and why now?
Where'd you get your ideas from? Oh, we're fine. Yeah, no, it came about initially. I had signed a 2-book deal with This Book is Gay, and then the second book of that deal was going to be a book about body image, and in particular at the time I was a man, and I was very fascinated, and my eyes had really been open to this whole subculture of gym addiction in London, because I'd moved to London, and guys in particular were working out in a way that I'd never experienced before, and I started to think, gosh, there might be something in that.
Yeah.
And so initially thought, oh, right, we'll write a book about sort of boys and body image. Then I thought, well, let's not stop there, let's just write about body image. And then I was talking to my editor, and we were like, well, let's not stop there, because actually body image is just part of a much bigger thing. Because actually, if you're going to look at, thank you, I was in danger of being blinded, thank you. We realised that body image and eating and food, it was just one part of a much bigger thing, actually. And so I sort of went back and said, look, what if we did? And we did, for a very brief period, refer to this title as This Book is Cray. Which, I don't know why we didn't stick with that. I just don't think that would have upset anyone.
Marketing kind of, sort of like had a little gentle word about that.
Yeah, I think it was my editor said, we might need to talk about the title.
Yeah.
Which is, like, no. That chance is a no. So it went from there, but immediately, straight away, I said, this isn't a book I can do by myself. I'm not going to name names, but there are plenty of writers out there who are writing about mental health who are not doctors. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't trust an author to do dentistry on me, nor do I really trust an author to tell me about my mental health. And luckily, I went to university where I did do psychology, although I ditched it as fast as I possibly could. But I knew that Olivia, who we studied together, we lived together. We went to university in North Wales, so we were in each other's pockets for the best part of 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I said, really, before I even agreed to write the book, I said, how would you feel about my friend Olivia sort of coming on board as well to sort of advise and keep me in line as well. The last thing I wanted to do was give advice that was harmful or factually inaccurate. And so yeah, that's where it started from.
And tell us about how you two met. What's your relationship like, and how did it change Did it change at all when you had to work together in this way?
Oh, interesting.
Take us back.
Yeah.
So, as you said, we met when we were at University in North Wales, which was a special experience.
I'm reliably informed that you used to go to lectures in your duvet, which I can wholly respect.
Yeah, it was really cold in North Wales. A lot. It rained a lot. And I think actually we've always worked pretty well together.
Yeah, because there was a lot of. I remember we used to revise together, and you used to work a lot harder than I did.
Yes,
if we're honest.
obviously. Yes, that's true. And actually, I found writing with you really easy.
I mean, we did. We basically took ourselves on holiday.
We went.
Which,
we did a destination. We went to the Isle of Wight.
Glamorous.
And in January, again cold. And
Why
shut
did
us
you do that? There's nothing open in the Isle of Wight in January.
Oh,
well, we didn't know
perfect.
until we got there.
It's quite limited, but it was perfect in terms of writing because there
Yeah.
were no distractions and
Like not even food.
or internet access.
I
It
had
was
to
like
cook one night. I lowered myself to turning on an oven. Yeah.
So I thought it actually was fine writing together.
Yeah. I mean,
I enjoyed it.
It was. I knew I had Olivia for that week, so we had to work.
Oh my god.
I've worked harder that week than I ever
It's like
have
when they
worked
used
before.
to lock Mick and Keith in the basement to write songs. It's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was fun. Like I say, I can tell you this on behalf of the Isle of Wight Tourist Board that there is one restaurant for every night of the week in January on the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
We made it work. It was
I
fun.
love the Isle of Wight, but it's shut a lot.
It was
Yeah.
so shut. But it was
Yeah.
there was something
Perfect.
quite, I don't know, for me, about crossing water that it sort of meant it really felt like I sort of left behind London and distractions.
Watery office.
And and so it was so strange being on an island and just getting it done. We worked really hard
we
that
did.
week.
We got all the kind of textbooks out and things like
Yep.
because the internet was quite limited there, so it was back to books and opening it all out, and it was good because some of this stuff was actually quite difficult, I
Well, it's
suppose.
really
in terms
intense.
of,
You know, it's like serious subjects like suicide, self-harm, every possible conceivable problem that a young person, even an adult, might face is in there. What I do like about it, and I'm wondering how this will be received by everybody, is the tone of it. It's very much your tone, very very lovely and light, and not at all flippant, but the little bit of a sense of humour right when you need it. But how difficult was that? Did you have to really sweat over that, or do you know what I mean, to get that balance right?
It was tricky. So the bit in the Isle of Wight, because I knew I had Olivia for that week, we sort of did sort of the facts and figures.
Yeah.
And before we went to the Isle of Wight, we'd sent out the survey, which we sort of harvested lots of data from well, actually we asked everybody, but we asked people to think about their teenage years in particular and sort of look at their mental health during that time. And so it was interesting because we very quickly realised by going through the data that sort of informed us.
Right.
So we're like, right, we're really hearing these themes. We're hearing a lot about anxiety, a lot about people, their esteem, their self-worth, about self-harm. Nobody came and said, I have a problem with food. But then they'd trickle through, and all of a sudden there'd be these very telling sentences like, and when I feel like that, sometimes I just stop eating for a couple of days. And like, right, okay, hold the phone, kind of.
Yeah.
And so we realised it was sort of there was a lot of knots to unpick.
But and I don't even think that's teenagers being deceptive. I was saying to you, how do you get this book in front of the right eyeballs? I mean, I was saying, when I was 15 or 16, I look back now and think I probably was quite depressed, but I don't think I had the mental agility or the tools to have that self-awareness at that age.
and that kind of framework. to
yeah.
hang it on.
And that's kind of what you're saying, and people probably don't think they have an eating disorder when they're saying, oh yeah, I just didn't eat for a couple of days. How do we get this book to the right sort of,
Well, I mean, that is the golden question of publishing,
Yeah.
which is, I mean,
Sorry.
there are a lot of books out there that
Yeah.
don't find the audience they deserve.
Yeah.
I think what I've seen through This Book Is Gay was it came out, I think it was nearly 2 years ago now, and at first there was, the initial, so when a book comes out, you hear from the book bloggers and you hear from librarians and teachers, and that was wonderful, but then there was a quiet patch, and then surely, but steadily, like my inbox started filling up with letters from teenagers all around the world, because by this point it had started coming out in America and places as well. And I think the same will be true of Mind Your Head. So the first people we convince are the librarians and the bloggers and the teachers, and they make sure they're in schools. Bookshops have been wonderfully supportive as well. And then 6 months to a year down the line, I think hopefully it will reach those people who need it. But the reason, you know, I try to keep it light, is because actually the last thing I think any of us want is a lecture.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was true of This Book Is Gay as well. I sort of thought, God, you know, it's bad enough to be 14 that I'm then asking you to read a textbook on top of it, you know, on top
Another
of
one. Yeah.
exactly all the stuff you've got to read at school. So I thought, you know, let's make it as conversational as possible, because this is a conversation that needs to happen. This shouldn't be a doomy, secretive society, because one thing that we were very clear about from the beginning was that idea of it being a spectrum. So on one end you've got the people who are just strung out because their exams are coming up, but then on the other you've got people who have got
more severe mental illnesses.
And without wanting to trivialise, you must see this in your work, Olivia, where, you know, I know people who suddenly they read a lot of literature about anxiety. So then they convince themselves they have anxiety. How do you know the difference between...
We did talk about that actually in the book. It's I know when we were studying psychology, suddenly, you know, you read the book and you're like, oh, maybe I've got that. Maybe so-and-so's got that. So we did kind of put a bit of a disclaimer in there about that. But we also talked a lot about people might have some of these symptoms or some of these things going on for them, but it's a lot about context and how much it's affecting your everyday life. So people, you know, everyone gets anxious, everyone has bad days, but it's about when does that persist and when does it start to impact on your everyday life.
Now, what were you guys like as teenagers? What would you without being too rude, which pages would you have gravitated to in this book, do you think?
Well, the gender dysphoria one would have been eye-opening.
Well, I mean, obviously, big elephant in the room tonight, which we will get to, but yes.
No, I remember, because the very first chapter of the book, I mean, I so clearly remember before university, me and my friends at school looking at these very dated sort of 70s and 80s books. Let's talk about bulimia. And there'd be like a picture of a sad girl on the front, forlornly at a plate of food. And we just thought it was hilarious. Kind of, I mean, we just didn't. And one of us, it wasn't me, but one of my friends was really badly bulimic and she thought it was hysterical. So I think it was the manner, the way it was approached, but it just feels the internet has changed so much the way that young people are able to communicate with each other. And I didn't know what the fuck was wrong with me, but I knew that I must be the only person in Bingley who felt that way. Whereas now I would have been online and I would have known that I probably wasn't the only LGBT person in the world. Whereas at the time, I just really thought that if I worked hard enough at school, eventually I would be normal. Well, look how that turned out.
Who is normal, really?
What is normal?
I mean, I love this question. I know it's an oldie but a goodie, but what would you tell your 15, 16-year-old selves?
Ooh, I would say that being 15 and 16 is hard, full stop.
It's awful.
It is, and I think...
Sorry, not the one over there. Got it all to know.
And I think, again, very much people would say, you know, school days are the best days of your life. And actually...
I've made a whole career out of that not being true.
I really know
twice.
whose school days were the best days of their lives. It certainly was not me. But anyone?
Not a single arm in the room.
The worst days of my life. Couldn't wait to get out of there.
And I think I would say 15, 16-year-olds, you know, being grown up is excellent. You get to make your own choices, you make your own decisions, you get your own responsibility.
I think it's about that escape. Like I have said to myself, don't worry, you are going to leave this town and overnight your life will change. And I remember my first week at university sort of thinking to myself, I've fooled these people. These people think I'm Cher from Clueless, and I'm really not. And but then it persisted. I wasn't the same person I'd been at school. And I know it's become such a cliche, but it's actually not, because it really does get better. And that's the thing with kind of catchphrases and slogans, they kind of, it gets better. But actually, it really does get better. Hang on in there, kind of.
Are you in touch with anyone from school?
No, because I killed them all.
I did not think of that. I should have done that. They all keep contacting me on Facebook. I should have murdered them.
No, I still, to this day, my best friend from school, we live together, well, not in the same flat, but we both live in Brighton now. The four of us, if you've read Hollow Pike, those four characters, we are still the best of friends now, and we sort of rescued each other. We sort of found each other at 16, and I think we identified that differentness in each other. And I know that's such a teenage thing to say, like, I was the only one like me in the world. But at the time it felt like that. So to find three others. Potentially, the jury is still out. But, it was, all of a sudden it changed everything. And, I'm a big advocate of saying to young people, if it's your friends that are making you miserable, get new ones. Because actually that's what I did, and it changed my life. And they're still my friends.
That's like jumping off a cliff when you're 14, isn't it? I mean, it really is. It's so hard. Tell me, this is your second non-fiction. Third, forgive me.
Being a boy was the first. Slightly redundant title.
Well, you can write a new one then.
Yeah.
But gravitating more towards non-fiction, or?
Every time I do a non-fiction, I say I'm never doing another non-fiction ever again. This Book is Gay was a living nightmare to write. I hated every minute because I was relying on other people, and I was sort of saying to I remember saying to my friend Christian, "Hi, could you tell me about living with HIV? I can't pay you, and I need it for this Thursday." And thankfully, Christian did it, and
You've just described all modern media.
It's terrifying premonition.
Yeah.
But and I felt really guilty about that, and my deadlines were looming, and I was chasing people all around the world. So I was saying, "Can you please tell me about this?" So then, when it came to Mind Your Head, I was a lot savvier, and sort of made sure that I wasn't relying on one. I wasn't putting all my eggs in one basket. So I knew that I actually this time I sort of went out in a slightly more, what's the word, sort of military way, in that instead of just saying on Twitter, "Hi, if you're anorexic, I'd love to talk to you," I sort of went to Beat, the eating disorder charity, and they put me in touch with one of their young ambassadors, and so it was all a lot more. I didn't want to be in that situation. I've been with This Book is Gay. And then after Mind Your Head, I said I would never again ever write another non-fiction book. But of course, I'm now writing about my transition, both for Glamour, and of course, I'm doing a book about becoming a woman, which is the working title. So.
Well, it's interesting. You've segued very nicely into that. I'm hugely proud to be hosting Juno's column on a transition for at least a year. I hope it's sort of like a regular updates in print and online about not only just the physicality, but all the politics, sexual and otherwise, around the whole issue. And this is your first event formally as Juno. So just how does it feel right now?
It feels really weird. I think the response has been so wonderful, but I knew it would be. I obviously had worries, and so to give you a timeline, I told some close friends about 3 years ago that I suspected I might be trans, and then I saw a therapist, and this has all been documented in the BuzzFeed and in the Clamour, what? Clamour, that could be a spin-off about shopping.
They do
Clamour for Glamour.
Yeah.
And I knew this was a long time coming, and of course I had worries, but I never for a second thought the YA community would be anything but wonderful, because these are the people you want to meet, kind of, when you look at the kind of things we're talking about in YA, there is a discussion about mental health, there is a discussion about gender, there is a discussion about sexuality, and so I knew it would be fine. It was just, there was a lot, and the lovely hockey have been wonderful because there's been a lot of practical considerations, and that was actually, I did not foresee that.
Well, I remember you when we were sort of doing all our wheeler dealing for the column, and we've sort of talked money and all that sort of thing. She said, "Oh, that's great, but can I get a subscription as well?" I said, "Yes." Who should I address the subscription to, James or Juno? And you said to me, "Oh God, I don't know." And there was things like that I found really refreshing, because I think sometimes we're a little bit afraid to even ask the awkward questions because we're frightened of being shouted down, of being politically incorrect.
Yeah, and that is, I love the internet, and I think the internet has done us the world of good, but there's that side of the internet, and you know exactly the side I'm talking about, that thing where you daren't say anything because you know that there is that slightly angry element that, if you put a toe over the line, people start tearing flesh at you. And I think a recent one was Ricky Gervais's jokes about Caitlyn Jenner at the Golden Globes, which were, in my mind, in no way transphobic. And I'm a trans woman, but straight away, it's transphobia. Talking about a trans woman is not transphobia, but it feels like sometimes that's the environment we have online. And that's one of the things with Mind Your Head, with This Book Is Gay, with the column, which is actually, God, a sense of humour. You know, when did it stop being fun?
You're allowed to say that, but I'm not going to proffer an opinion.
True.
On the Caitlin.
And,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Because I'm too scared of the internet. But yeah.
And that's sad. It's sad because I remember when we met, and I would like to take this opportunity as well to say that I think it's so wonderful that you've invited a trans woman to write in a women's magazine, because that's the kind of progress we want. And, you know, I think, you know, I keep being asked about The Danish Girl, and I think, well, I think it's wonderful. Ask me again in 2 years if there's been another film with a trans character in, and there won't have been. Because look what happened after Brokeback Mountain. Name the other gay film after Brokeback Mountain. And so I think it's so wonderful that there is a monthly column, you know. I think it's wonderful. But I remember when we first met, I was just babbling away, and I said the word cisgender, and you kind of said, I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure what that means.
I was too scared to ask.
Exactly, but isn't that sad?
I kept thinking that if I read enough, I would kind of figure out what that meant. So then you were being so lovely, I just thought, he won't yell at me for asking. So,
and that's it. Isn't it sad that, you know, there are people out there who have perfectly legitimate questions, but feel that they can't ask, and that's hopefully what I'm going to do with the column, which is sort of walk. You know, I mean, slightly selfishly, walk my mother through my transition. Kind of a woman who is not on the internet.
I see what's going on.
Just read the column every month, that'll be fine. Yeah. And, you know, sort of assuming, because you forget actually that not everyone is on Tumblr, not everyone is on Instagram.
Like me.
Like Olivia. Olivia only got a phone about 1.5 years ago. True.
Actually true.
Yeah.
And you're probably the most sane person of the lot of us.
Well, I don't know about that.
But I just sort of thought, well, actually, let's imagine that not everybody is versed in the vocabulary around gender and feminism and sexuality, and those are things that I'm really interested in. But, you know, we'll see where it goes, and I think, you know, this is a super exciting time for gender and sexuality, and, you know, I think, again, the generation below us, they see it very differently to the way that we see it, and much, much differently to the way that my mother sort of views it. So I think it's a really interesting time. I think, you know, heading into 2016, I don't really know what's going to happen next. I think it feels like we're at the point with trans awareness now that we were at with sort of lesbian and gay awareness in the 90s, with that sort of, with Ellen DeGeneres and Graham Norton and, you know, Brian on Big Brother, those kind of real breakthrough moments. It feels like we're kind of there now. So who can say?
Do you feel like, do you feel sort of like freer? Do you feel happier than you've ever been? Where are you in your head in the sort of like the destination spectrum?
There's a lot to think about. I think there are still days where it just feels like just an uphill struggle. And I think that my low point, I was very tired, I hadn't slept very well. And I went to have a beard lasering session, and I just burst into tears. Not because it hurt, but because I was like, why have I still got a beard? This is the 3rd session. Surely it should have gone by now. And she was like, it's about 12, 15 sessions. Why? And it just really ground me down, because I was like, I don't want a beard. You used to have such a good beard.
I don't want one either.
Yeah. But so that's on a practical level. On a sort of philosophical sort of level, I feel better than I ever have done. And I was saying in the coffee shop upstairs that every day that I was trying to be a boy was a day where I felt like I had failed. And I don't know, well, I do know because I've lived it, but living with failure every single day was quite trying, so it turns out. But I didn't realise I was living with that failure until I stopped trying to be a boy. And so all of a sudden my life just feels like I've got like an extra half an hour in the day, because I don't have to set aside that time for feeling like I'm getting it wrong. So it kind of feels like I'm getting it right. You know, however I look and whatever I do, it feels like I'm getting it right. So yeah, it's been fun.
It's brilliant.
Good times.
I was surprised that there was actually so little about transgender in Mind Your Head.
Yes.
Was that a conscious decision?
Yes, because I remember us talking about that. Now, at the time,
I know it's not a mental illness, but I think it kind of raises a lot of...
So, and that's kind of what we said, because it was that weekend that I told Olivia that I was about to start transitioning, so it was a surprise. Here we are on the Isle of Wight. There's nothing else to talk about. And we said, I remember writing that section really clearly, and I remember we sort of said, gender dysphoria is not in and of itself a mental illness. What else do we sort of need to say about it? And we realise that actually, and then there's another sentence that says, however, living, feeling that sense of failure or that you're not getting it right, I think actually leans more towards anxiety or depression. And, those things are covered.
It kind of makes you more vulnerable.
Yes, absolutely.
To having other
And,
mental
trans people are
yeah.
vastly more at risk of suicide. So it's, so really what we did from that section about gender dysphoria, we sort of said, you're fine, however, it could well be. And the same is true of LGB plus people as well, that there's still, particularly gay women. Gay women are hugely at risk of self-harm, and, and again, so it's kind of, being gay is not a mental illness. However, that sense of isolation and fear and worry about coming out, yes, being LGBT is still hugely correlated with mental health problems, but not because you're LGBT.
Understood. Do you think you will write a book about this whole subject? Has that crossed your mind?
I mean, it's happening now, so it's kind of, again, straight away, and it was really interesting, the week that BuzzFeed article came out, which was really fun. I was away in Dublin, so I felt kind of really away from it, so it was quite nice actually. I was sort of in hiding, kind of gender relocation program, so I was off there, but as soon as I got back from Dublin, emails started coming in from publishers all over saying, oh my gosh, do you want to write about this? Are you willing to write about this? And initially I said no, because it's almost being a boy, this book is gay, and so I thought they were quite a nice trilogy kind of. But then, as happened with Mind Your Head and This Book Is Gay, I sort of thought, but what do you want to say? And actually, what do you want to write about? And actually, I don't think, I still think you should be at least 150 before you write a memoir. Because that's I think the only way you can justify it, Billy Piper. And
well, you can't stop Billy this time.
it's just, but that was the one I read straight. So I was thinking, actually, do you know what? Actually, that's funny because one of my favourite books of all time ever is If Only by Jerry Halliwell. And this is really awful. I've not even had to think after I read If Only by Jerry Halliwell, I wrote her fan mail saying I would be her friend because it just felt like she really needed a friend. And do you know what? I think she did. Actually. So I thought, well, what do I want to say? And so actually the book that I want to write actually is about the construct of women, actually, and sort of, in particular, the way that the media and fiction and films and the way that lots of different, about almost the messages of womanhood. Because I didn't think I was a woman, but I was getting those messages very clearly. And, all through my childhood, there were such strong messages about, they are not for you, these things are not for you.
Yes.
So it was very odd, sort of hearing those messages, but trying to ignore them as best as I could. And now that I am a woman, it's sort of even stranger to sort of now be sort of a part of it. Like getting ready takes a lot longer. Like I'm wearing some makeup tonight.
When you were talking about that extra half hour you've got, I was thinking you can just pretty quickly.
Yeah, well gosh, I'll say
I'm going to ask one more question before we throw to the floor. Do you think that it's going to change the way that you write? Is it going to change the voices of your characters? Is it going to change the subjects that you want to write about?
No, I think I have always been, and I think a lot of authors get plagued if you are writing a character who's not of your gender. From day one with Hollow Pike, I go, how do you write such good female characters? Hopefully that will stop now. But strangely, do you know what? Nobody's going to ask me how do you write such good male characters, because of course being male is the universal experience, isn't it? So I was just, I've been asked time and time again, how do you write such good girl characters? But strangely, I just never, again, maybe because I was in a slightly different position as a woman who thought she was a man, maybe I just never assumed there would be a difference, And when I sat down, however many years ago it was, to write Hollow Pike, I didn't sort of think, ooh, right, Liz is a girl, so she probably doesn't want to be murdered by the witch hunters. It was just kind of like, of course she doesn't want to be murdered by a witch hunter. Who does? Kind of. And, I just, off I went. So I never really thought about it.
I think you've just got the female acid tongue gift. I think that's what it is. That's what I read in your. That's
Are you saying that I'm spiteful? And
no. I say that.
Because that's true.
I said that with utmost admiration. So I think, how long have we got? We've got some time for questions from the audience. I'm sure that you've got plenty of questions. Who would like to go man in purple?
As you know, I loved your book about being a boy, but I also was fascinated by you saying that the internet is actually, on the whole, I agree, it's really good. But if you come across the damage that young teens get by going to websites that actually
We talk
negative-
about
Ooh,
it,
yes.
Good question.
Go on, Olivia.
Those alarming
Talk to us about
pro-ana
enablers.
websites.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we talk in the book quite a bit about how, on the one hand, the internet has enabled lots of people to find information and also to find people who are having similar experiences to them, which can be really helpful. But that there is a darker side, potentially, to the internet, and that sometimes people seem to get kind of stuck with a network or surround themselves with people who potentially have similar problems to them. So there's quite a lot in terms of kind of eating disorder websites or websites around self-harm, where people just get stuck in that pattern. And actually we talk about how having support is fantastic, but actually if all you're doing is kind of going around in a circle, is that really helpful?
Reinforcing behaviour.
How do you spot those toxic friendships when you're actually deeply in one?
Ooh, well, I mean, I don't think you can. I think, and we say this in the book as well, that there has to be a readiness, that willingness to change. And I think sometimes, if you are, a teenager who is going on pro-ana and pro-Mia websites or self-harm forums, then that's, I guess, you're not ready to get out of it yet. And one of the things, we say in the book, which is, again, there's a lot about how do you support your friend if he is self-harming, or how do you support a friend if she's not eating properly. And the thing we say is you can't force someone to get better because it's an illness. Will you just get up with your broken leg? It's not going to work. And so, some people, maybe I guess perceive those websites are helping. And if they perceive it's helping, then who are we really to say it's not? Although what I love is now, I think when you go on, and I did for research, when you go on sort of pro-ana and pro-Mia websites, they look incredibly dated now. Because actually there are websites like The Site and Young Minds and Mind and Beat. There are so many great proactive websites out there targeting young people, which are just better now. And I think that those, particularly if you look at something like thesite.org, I think that came about as a reaction to things like pro-ana and pro-Mia websites. And they were like, okay, let's do the alternative. And actually, I think now those websites are so well funded and so well supported that hopefully for young people, they would be the first port of call instead of just sort of Googling thigh gap.
Can I ask one follow-up question to that to Dr. Olivia? It's like, at what point, I think sometimes we're reluctant to be vigilant, sometimes we're reluctant to ask the nosy questions about somebody. Is that something that as a psychologist you would advise, as if you see your friend isn't eating or is suddenly being incredibly secretive? What's the course of action?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is around worrying about causing people offence or upsetting them. But actually, if that's what we're worried about, this person probably is quite upset already. And I think it's okay to ask those questions. And I think it's a really brave thing to do, to be able to say to someone, actually, I'm really worried about you. Yeah. And rather than go, you need to tell me exactly what's going on, it's about saying, this is my concern. Is there anything I can do to support you?
Yeah. Anyone else?
Have you always found you attractive?
No, because I grew up in the late Jurassic period. And there was plainly no such thing. And I've thought about this really hard. I sat down and thought, right, there must have been one. There must have been one during the 80s or the 90s that I could have recognised myself in, and I sort of missed it. There was nothing. There was Danny LaRue and RuPaul, and I'm not a drag queen. So I was doomed, and then I think possibly, you heard rumours of sex change, like the word sex change botched up, death. And you're like, oh, that sounds great. Sign me up. What I did know from the age of about 3 was that I really wanted to be a girl, but I thought there was nothing you could do about it, and I thought that was quite normal. I just thought, oh gosh, yeah, who wouldn't want to be a girl? They can just have all this hair and stuff, and they can have She-Ra and be unchallenged with having She-Ra, and I just thought that would be great. I remember very clearly at the time one of my little girlfriends saying, well, no, I want to be a boy. You can play sports and do cool stuff. And, you know, it's really clear now that gender stereotypes don't benefit anyone at all. And unfortunately, you know, it was a really long time, many, many years later, until, you know, I was writing This Book Is Gay, and I was interviewing trans people, and as well interviewing a diverse range of trans people, because Hayley on Coronation Street was a woman, and also, you know, I wasn't a dumpy little woman in Manchester, so I just couldn't see myself in that character either. So it was when I met people like Paris Lees, when I became aware of Andrea Petchich, you know, that I sort of thought, ooh, that feels like a space I could occupy, kind of. But I would have had no clue in the 80s or 90s that that was an option. And, you know, it shoulda, woulda, coulda, because even if I had figured out I was transgender, the world was not ready for us. So, you know, I wouldn't have had access to medication. Doctors didn't know what they were doing. So actually, I don't regret too much that I lived for 15 years as a gay man, because actually, do you know what? There wouldn't have been too many benefits to me coming out back then. I would have been stuck with the body I had. Nobody would have done anything for me. So, you know, everything, you know, I enjoyed my 20s. It was fun. There's a hand.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, it's Katie! Oh, it's Claire. Sorry, I haven't got my glasses on.
So, I was wondering with your former hat as a teacher, if obviously it's sort of a holistic sort of support network is really useful. So organisations like Young Minds and parents accepting and supporting. But is there anything specifically that you think schools should be doing or could be doing more to support young people?
Ooh, you've pulled the thread now.
Lock the doors, we'll be here for the night.
As an ex-teacher, I have some opinions about the education system. No, I think we need to burn it down and start again. We've gone badly wrong with this international obsession with being as good as South Korea, which has the highest teen suicide rate in the world. I wonder if there's a correlation. You know, we need to stop, because I work for a charity called First Story. I'm in a secondary school once a week, and all I see is this frantic obsession with raising standards, and the well-being of children has been completely forgotten about. You know, with this, we've got to keep the school outstanding. You know, oh, we're outstanding, so we've got to keep it outstanding. And, you know, if we don't, you know, and I don't... So there's this sort of very vicious circle of sort of passing pressure around, heads down to teachers, teachers down to pupils, and the results come in, and it all goes back to government, obviously. What we need to do is we've got to look at that curriculum, because they're pounding English, maths and science in particular. And in a framework of English, maths and science, where do you talk about mental health?
Yeah.
You know, where do you give them time to, you know, because actually primary schools, I think, do this maybe better than secondary schools. But, you know, where do you give them the time to talk about gender? Where do you give them the time to talk about feminism? Where do you give them the time to talk about politics, you know, or the situation with Syria? There is no time in the curriculum. So that's what teachers need. Teachers need time, and it's time they haven't got. So really, this does have to come from the very top. And while there is this obsession with raising standards, teachers aren't going to be given any extra time. I mean, the school I'm in at the moment now, they've already extended the school day to 4:30 to do extra science. You know, so what, you know, we start doing night school in PSHE, and PSHE, which is the curriculum area that would cover it, is still non-mandatory. So some schools just don't do it, you know.
I'm really depressed now.
Quick, say something funny.
I think we've got time for one more. One more question.
Hello.
Hello, Juno.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Fine. Do you have a question? Is that the question?
I keep forgetting to ask that, you're right.
That's not my question. I can't count that. I don't want to count.
Yeah.
Fine, don't answer this if you don't want to.
Okay.
But seeing as how you know you and I are on a
Yeah.
similar path, do you ever look in the mirror sometimes and see James looking back at you and struggle?
Well, no, because they're one in the same. I think it's not like some weird sort of like Gone Girl-like thriller where, you know, I'm going to like burn photos. I'm so proud of everything that I achieved in my 20s that I wouldn't dream of sort of trying to erase that, which is a reason why, you know, I decided, and it was very much a decision to not disappear for 3 years and do a Caitlyn Jenner in 3 years and come back with a load of hair and face. You know, I sort of thought, because it's a transition, but it is the same person, you know, and I've said this many times as well, if my name had been Alex or Sam, I wouldn't have even bothered changing it. You know, as it is, given that, as however much Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are trying to make James happen for a girl, it just isn't. So I sort of thought, well, if I'm going to change my name, I might as well have some fun with it and go with a name that I really like, which is where Juno came from. But, you know, it's always been Juno. It's always been there, you know, and, you know, I've had beards and I've had mullets and I've been in weird electro-clash bands.
You had a mullet?
There was a mullet, and the mullet was brilliant. You know, it was long down this side, and spiky on top, and there was a blonde bit in the front and a blonde bit at the back.
This is the thing you shouldn't tell anyone.
But this is the shameful part. So you know, it's all the same person, and you know that there will be some changes physically, but that's because now I feel like I've been given carte blanche to do what I've always wanted to do, you know, which is, you know, the way I wanted to look apparently when I was like 8. So it's kind of, you know, this is me now, kind of acting out, you know, I suppose. But yeah, no, I think, you know, I do wish, you know, I wish the process happened faster. I wish for lots of things, you know, but actually, it's a bit like that thing, it's a bit like X-Men 3, whereby if you were offered a cure for your mutant power, would you take it? And if somebody was to say, you know, if you could have some sort of like magical do-over where you could go back and be born natally female, would you do it? I don't think I would, because this is really exciting and I've had such fun. You know, since I got out of Bingley, everything in Bangor, but it has. You know, I never looked back. All of university, I moved to Brighton, I moved to London. It's been really good fun, and actually, I don't think I would change any of it. So even though sometimes I do look at me and sort of think, oh God, have a shave for God's sake. You know, actually, that is part of all of this realness. It's all there. So yeah, no, I'm fine with it.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to both Dr. Olivia Hewitt and Juno Dawson. That was really enlightening and entertaining.